All right, welcome back. Now let's talk about numbers. All right, so let me open our default HTML page. Let me save it as numbers.php. Yeah, replace please. So let me write numbers like that. All right, so numbers are assigned exactly the way we assign every other data type. So I can say something like number equals 34, something like that. And then if I say echo num, I'll get the same result. So let's run this in Firefox. Then let me remove this part that says htdocs and change it to localhost, like that. And there we have our answer, like 34. And please make sure that Apache is running while you're doing this, otherwise you won't get any result. All right, so there are several things you could do. You could do calculations. Okay, that's the XAMPP control panel, and Apache is running, as you can see right there. You could echo out with a calculation like that. Let me say num plus 123. And if I refresh, it automatically does that. It doesn't mean that this variable value has changed. This calculation is done in place. So I could add, actually, let me just copy one of these calculations here. Something like this, and minus 5, something like that. So this is how we multiply. It's the asterisk, that's the symbol for multiplication. This is plus, the slash is divide by, and this is the minus sign. So in this case, if I did that, I'll get an answer like that. And sometimes you would not know the order of calculation that it will follow, so you could add brackets like that to make sure that, for example, it calculates this first and then multiplies and then divides like that. Let me do that so we get a different result. Let me see that. And we get something else after doing it that way. Another thing to note is that you cannot divide by 0, for example. This will generate an error. Let me do that. And you see warning, division by 0. So dividing by 0 on line 16. This is an illegal operation. It's not allowed. So in future, you'll be able to add a condition to say if it's a 0, don't divide by it if it is, and so on. All right, so let's look at some functions we can use to manipulate numbers. All right, so to start with, let me show you these. Let me comment these out so we only see the first one. So in order to get a random number, all you have to do is type rand, open and close bracket like that. So here I've got a string that I'm echoing, and you see the concatenation here and there, and a break tag to make sure that the next numbers go on the next line. So rand generates a random number. So let's see that in action, and you see the random number there. If I refresh the page, the number changes every time, like that. Okay, so I could also specify which numbers between what number and what number. Like here, I would say rand, open bracket, 1, 100. This means any number between 1 and 100, and 101 are also included in that selection. So let me do that random number. So you see random number 70 there, 92, and so on. Let's go to the next one. This one is modulo. It's called the modulo. You type fmod. Now modulo is the remainder of a division. So here it says this is like 30 divided by 4. And then the remainder is what I'll get, not the answer, but the remainder. So in this case, the remainder is 2, because 4 into 30 is 7, remainder 2. Then the other one is square root. You type sqrt, and you put the number in there, and you get the square root. In this case, it should be 10, like that. And then there's abs, which talks about the absolute value. So in case you do a calculation where you're not sure if the answer is going to be a negative or a positive, you can use abs to make sure that it's always a positive value. So that will return 100 instead of negative 100. So let's try some more functions over here. So incrementing and decrementing. This is one way of adding to a number, for example. So the number is equal to 10. Let's echo out number. Let me comment out these. So you see here it says num plus equals 2. This is like the way we were doing a concatenation with strings, but in this case we are doing a arithmetic. This operation here is exactly the same as saying num is equal to num plus 2. So num is equal to whatever is contained in num plus 2. It's exactly the same way. This is a shortcut. It's much shorter, so it's num plus equals 2. So you can do this with all these, minus, division, and multiplication. You get the same result. So let's see what that gives us. Let me echo out. Oh, it's already on echo. So if I echo this one out, you see, unfortunately, it's echoing on the same line. So let me do something about that. Let me mute this one and just get one answer. So it's 12 because we are adding 2 to that, okay, which is exactly the same as doing that. So let's see that in action. You still get a 12. So you can do this for all these operations: divide by 2, minus 2, and so on. Let me try one at a time. Yeah, divide by 2 is 5. Multiply by 2 will be 20. That's what we'll get, and so on. So you can test these out and see what you get. So let's move on to other types of numbers. So now with these numbers we've been dealing with are actually integers because they don't have any decimal places. So let me bring in these ones with decimal places. Now a number with a decimal place is called a float. The reason why it's different to an integer is because computers store integers and floats in a different way. So any number with a decimal point is a float. So in this case, you can do math with floats exactly the same way. So let me mute these over here so we can see what we get here. So we get 14.45 when we add a 4. So we do normal math with these guys. Now, if you want to round it off, for example, you type round and then you put an open bracket, put the value in there, and then a close bracket. So what will happen now is that the value will be rounded off. So from 10.45 to 10, because this is 45, so it rounds up down. I think it's rounding down in this case. Now you can specify that you want several decimal places. Let me add 1 at the end. I put a comma and 1, which means round it off to 1 decimal place, for example. So if this had more decimal places, for example, there, I could still say round off to 2 decimal places. And then you see this is rounded off to that. Now, if you want to be very specific how this is rounded off, what you could use is this one called ceiling. Ceiling will always round up, okay? So if I do that, it will round up from 10.45 to 11, okay? If I want to round down instead, I'll use floor. So floor will round down to 10, like that. So these are the functions, and let me see a few more down here. Let me get that. So let me just paste that. So now these others, this we've already done. There's one where you can check if a number is an integer or is a float or it's numeric in general. So let's see what results we get in this case. So is integer, you see nothing here because this is false. Now false is represented by a no. It's like nothing, 0 or nothing is float. You get a 1 as represented as true. So 1 is true, nothing is false, and so on. So it's a numeric number. Yes, it's a number, so it's numeric. If this was text, for example, if I say float equals to, let me put some text in there and just say name, I will get different results with this. Let me refresh. And as you can see now, I'm not even doing any, it's just false, is integer false, is float false, 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 and so on. So this is what you need to know so far about numbers, and I will see you in the next lesson where we deal with a different data type.